free market think tanks promoting transparency and having embarked on their own transparency in government projects was 44. So that is impressive, and those certainly serve as a catalyst in moving the ball forward. We're also seeing great improvements at the local level. This has a great spillover effect, and we're working with counties, school boards, we're working with cities, city council members to promote transparency in government spending also at the local level, because we think this is really an area where the transformational power of this issue kicks in. At the local level, transparency in government spending allows us to recruit a whole new class of candidates that now have something tangible to run on, whereas before you have to run against fuzzy ideas. Now you can, for example, run on the 10 checks you would not have written had you been on the school board. So that is a pretty powerful tool, and we think the time is right for this in Montana as it is around the country. The bipartisan nature of this, this issue makes it possible for this effort to thrive regardless of what the composition, the partisan composition of your legislature is. And the reason for that is simple. This is a common sense issue. Again, this goes back to the founding principles of this very country. And taxpayers fund every expenditure made by the government. We should not never forget this. They deserve to track every tax dollar. And as, or in other words, as Governor Rick Perry said it, if the taxpayers are picking up the receipt, picking up the tab, they ought to be able to look at every item on the receipt. This is a consensus that spans across party lines, and while we may not or definitely do not agree on the optimal size of government on both sides of the political aisle, and also not on the spending priorities, we do agree that government spending should not happen in the dark, and what the information that we're looking to get posted on the internet is actually virtually in all cases public information. As Carl was saying, the question is just how do you get to it? It's there, but it's just not accessible. They're subject to sunshine laws, but the problem for too long has been access. You would have to go to the archives. You would have to file a Freedom of Information request, fill out the forms, hope that you asked the question right, and you might or might not get the answer to the question you were asking. The maturing of the internet has changed the dynamics of how we get information, how information is exchanged. And today, information exchange occurs over the internet virtually in real time. That leads us to believe that, and that is something a bill sponsor in Ohio pointed out very well, information that is not available online is only nominally public. Taxpayers support transparency in government spending. We recently saw a poll that found that the public believes that government has an obligation to report and explain how government generates and spends money, but it's not meeting that obligation. And improved reporting and providing open disclosure of spending was one of the most frequently given answers to the question on how government could improve on the image of being too secretive. Now you may ask, what's the catch? If this is such a no-brainer, such a beautiful issue, why hasn't everybody done this yet? Well, there really is no catch, but there certainly, with everything, are a few obstacles that you're going to have to overcome. You may run into a few problems. One of the issues that we've seen is people are running into resistance from the bureaucracy. Especially those that are going to be tasked with the implementation of these websites may say, oh, we can't do this. This is impossible. Well, this is how OMB also started out at the federal level. They said, oh, we can't do this. They did it. They did it faster than they were supposed to, and they did it at a much lower price tag than initially anticipated. And that leads us to the next roadblock that people like to put up, and that is the cost. Well, there is a price tag. You're going to have to dedicate some resources to this, but We have seen this happen at little or no cost to taxpayers because people were just shifting their priorities within the budget framework. Generally, the cost is much lower than anticipated. We've seen this at the federal level. We've seen this at the state and at the local level. This doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg, and if you factor in the savings, and there are savings, you're gonna see efficiencies, and you're gonna see savings, or you're actually not gonna see those savings, but there will be savings. I'll talk about that a little later, because there are the intangible savings that just need people to change their spending patterns. If you factor in those, transparency all of a sudden becomes a bargain. Another question is that we sometimes get is who's actually going to look at this? Do people even care? Why are we doing this? Well, Missouri launched their website last July, not this year, but last year, and they had 13 million web hits on that website. And a Maine state think tank recently launched their transparency portal. They launched it about a month ago, and they had 31,200 unique visitors to that website, spending roughly 5,075 hours researching spending transparency information. So people do care. So once you've laid out that framework, if people still balk at the idea, then really the question becomes, what do you have to hide? And that is going to be all the more reason to move forward with this. Beyond accountability, what are the benefits? I mentioned savings. The tangible ones are, for example, the efficiencies that Texas State Comptroller Susan Combs realized in her state. She was able to, using information from the spending portal that she created, identify $2.3 million in savings in her office alone, achieving efficiencies by eliminating duplicative contracts for toner, for example. Realizing that her agency was about to print a study that was already being printed by another agency, another $200,000 in savings. So it's those efficiencies, those are the tangible savings that you'll see. And then you'll have the ones that you're not going to see. And a friend of ours likened it a little bit to quantum physics ones. The observation of particles changes their behavior. The observation of spending patterns is also likely going to affect those spending patterns. You might not buy your furniture at an expensive office furniture at an expensive store anymore. You might shop for furniture at a place like IKEA or get your office equipment at Staples. So those are the intangible savings, and we think we have an example of where those were realized with Kansas, where we were working closely with a transparency sponsor, and they launched the website at the beginning of this year. She said having that website has affected the tone of the budget negotiations. They frequently refer to the fact that their spending patterns are going to be subject to public scrutiny, and they were able to, now granted that's still much too high, but they were able to hold budget growth to 5% rather than the usual 7 or 8% that they've seen in years prior to that. Now, we won't be able to prove the correlation, but a lot of the people on the ground believe that transparency had a lot to do with that. In closing, I would like to invite you to spend some time on our new website, fiscalaccountability.org, and we have it pulled up for you. What we have on this website is a lot of information in terms of examples of spending transparency, cost estimates, Q&A, we have video, daily updates. You can sign up for a weekly newsletter, and we're going to be circulating a sign-up sheet for that too. But you can do it through the website, or you can just do it on that sheet, and we'll put that up for you. Our front page doubles as a blog. So if you are interested in the latest in the area of fiscal accountability, and not just spending transparency, but in general, that's where you can find a lot of interesting tidbits of information. And we have transparency news tagged with a little magnifying glass here. We have an overview on transparency. We have a toolkit. with model legislation, again, Q&A.